has since slid back into that original position with his head down at a 60 or a 70-degree angle, so a very uncomfortable spot, and rescuers very worried tonight.
When John Jones, his brother, and 10 of his friends entered Nutty Putty that fateful day, they were ready to have the time of their lives. But now, the only part of John Jones' brother Josh could see were his feet. The rest of his body had been encased, upside down in a fissure of rock less than 10 inches wide. John had made a grave mistake. He had pushed too far into the cave in search of a passage, and now he had no way of getting himself out. His brother would try everything he possibly could before eventually giving up. And as he left him there to go and get further help, only one thought kept repeating over and over again in his head. I don't know if we can get him out. At 8 p.m. on November 24th, 2009, John Jones, his brother Josh, and their group of 10 would slip down Nutty Putty's entrance at Utah Lake. As they passed through the cave, the first main section they would encounter was the big slide. This section was fun, and an almost perfect way to spend an evening for the young 26-year-old doctor and all of his friends. But it wasn't the most challenging section. Those lay deeper in the system, and John, not being content with crawling around these easier areas, started to search for a squeeze known as the Birth Canal, an incredibly tight area of the cave for the average person, never mind someone standing at almost 6 feet tall and weighing around 200 pounds. At some point in their exploration of the cave, John, his brother, and 2 of their other friends had left all the others behind. Each of the 4 pushing and squeezing around each deep channel they could see, hoping to find the canal. Then John saw it, or he thought he did, a waist-high hole that looked like it might be the birth canal. Head first, he pushed and squeezed himself forward through each twist in the channel. As he progressed deeper, places that would enable him to turn around became non-existent. But John, trusting that this was what he had been searching for, pushed on, only needing to push through one extremely small fissure ahead of him. Then, if it was the canal, it would open into a chamber that would be large enough to allow him to turn around. But that one final fissure was almost vertically downwards. It would be hard to get through, but considering that he wasn't able to turn around anyways, the only way to move was forward. So he sucked in his chest and moved over the lip of the fissure, and down he went. He was immediately stuck. His exhale had pinned him in place in a 10-inch wide crack. His attempts to free himself only seemed to push him further into place. There was no way forward either. What he had hoped would open out further into a larger chamber instead sealed shut into a wall of rock. He was now stuck in place, upside down, in passages deep within Nutty Putty, and he had no way of getting out.
He'd worked himself face forward through a series of tight passes, and he'd gotten himself to a point where he couldn't back up.
It's now been about 22 hours.
John's brother, Josh, began making his way towards where John was calling from. Following the same path, it slowly started to dawn on him just how bad the situation really was. The passage John had gone down was extremely tight and difficult to navigate. When he did eventually reach him, the only real part of John that was visible was his feet. He immediately tried to free him. Josh had crawled into the space feet first. This meant he was able to wrap his feet around John's and attempt to drag him out. And he did manage to raise him several inches. But John had nothing to hold on to, as one of his arms was pinned beneath him. As soon as Josh let go, he slipped straight back into the hole. If he was going to get out, Josh wasn't going to be able to do it alone. So leaving the cave to call search and rescue, Josh got one of their friends to sit on the ledge above John until further help arrived. But this wasn't even the first time someone had gotten stuck in Nutty Putty. Over the course of a decade, 11 people would end up getting trapped in the cave. On one occasion, a 16-year-old boy would end up getting stuck upside down as he tried to push headfirst through one of its passages. He would manage to get out, but not before spending 14 hours stuck upside down, and eventually having to be dragged and pushed almost 400 feet to the exit. It would be 3 hours before the first members of the search and rescue team would manage to reach John. Susie Motola was the first on the scene, her small stature of just 5 foot 3 inches allowing her to enter into parts of the cave the others couldn't. She made assurances to John that they would be able to get him out in no time at all. But as she started to realise both the position that John was stuck in and just how difficult his location was to access, what seemed like a simple rescue in her head became anything but. Susie, like Josh, wasn't going to be capable of pulling him out by herself. But she was able to get a rope around John, a rope that led backwards to a larger room where multiple people would be able to hopefully pull him out. But try as they might, the friction of the rope on the cave's walls was too much to actually get John out of his position. Susie was able to help him change his position slightly, even being able to pour water down his side, hoping that at least some of it would manage to reach his mouth. But despite all their attempts, John still lay in the exact same spot as he did hours ago. The effect of being upside down, like John had been for hours at this point, can start to have horrific effects on the body. Almost immediately, with the strain he would be under, just breathing itself would be difficult. Being upside down, gravity would also push the lower organs down, compressing his lungs and preventing them from fully expanding. But that wouldn't be the only problem John would face while he was upside down. His heart was never meant to pump against the force of gravity. It was under an incredible amount of pressure just to push blood into John's legs. If he was left in this position for a long enough period of time, it would eventually lead to cardiac arrest and his eventual death. With the attempts to directly pull John out failing, and a small city of rescuers now gathered on the ground above the cave, a new method of getting John out was going to be needed. That's when the pulley system was devised. A rope would be tied around John's legs, then this rope would be fed through a series of pulleys placed in the cave's wall. This would significantly reduce the amount of friction on the rope and lower the amount of pull needed by rescuers to lift John out. However, Nutty Putty wasn't an easy cave to set something like this up in. It was extremely popular, and its overuse led to the soft, putty-like clay that the walls were composed of, softening and smoothing over time. At this point, the smoothing had gotten to such an extent that many predicted a fatality was only a matter of time. This also meant setting up a series of pulleys and pushing each one past the soft walls of the cave and into the rock that would actually hold the weight of John took time. A lot of time. Each pulley would take almost an hour just to place due to the tightness and compressed nature of the area around where John was stuck. Slowly for John, but quickly for those trying to rescue him, hour by hour slipped by. All the while, John's heart grew more strained and his breathing became more and more laboured. But now at least there was hope. The rope was placed around him as low as it was possible to reach, and the area around John was also widened, anticipating his exit. By this point, everything was in place to pull, and so they did. John was slowly raised from his initial position. The effort of those on the other end of the rope seemed to be working, but as John was raised from the fissure, those looking on had a dreadful realization. The way that John was positioned within the fissure and how close the ceiling was to his feet meant that they had no hope of pulling him directly out without breaking both of his legs. And because John had been wedged in this position for hours upon hours at this point, the effect that the shock of breaking his bones would have on his already struggling body would most likely kill him. This became apparent when they pulled him up, managing to raise his feet to the ceiling. the simple contact causing him to squeal out in pain. The puzzle of trying to get John out alive seemed almost impossible to solve. By this point, John had basically been upside down for almost 12 hours, and with the current pulley system clearly not able to get him out, and John losing more and more touch with reality, something needed to change, and change quickly.
Far from being a recovery, it's a rescue, but the longer it goes, obviously, the more concern there is.
"Help me get out. I don't want to be on my head," John told Ryan, one of the rescuers, when he arrived. "Why are you on your head?" Ryan asked. "Why did you guys put me here?" John replied. Eventually, heavier tools would manage to make their way down the cave, allowing those around John to completely rebuild the pulley system by directly drilling into the rock face instead of simply placing pieces. This would make the entire pulley system much stronger and also lower the chance of pulleys slipping out or coming out. The fissure John was trapped in was narrower on one side than the other. If the rescue team could manage to move him to the wider side when lifted, like the first time, they would then be able to pull as hard as they could, and hopefully they would manage to extract him. The extra wiggle room from moving John to the wider side hopefully being enough. If they did manage to get him out, everything was being planned for. Medical assistance would be there immediately, and medicine was being prepped to be given to him upon his extraction. While work continued on the new pulley system, John's wife, Emily, had made her way to the entrance of the cave. A line with the speaker on the end would then be taken all the way down to where John lay. Ryan, the rescuer above John, then carefully lowered the speaker down to him. He was finally able to hear his wife's voice for the first time in almost 19 hours. "I love you, keep fighting." Upon hearing her voice, John yelled back, I love you, tell Lizzie, their 1-year-old child, I love her. I'll get out and I'll come see you." With the pulleys now in place, the rope threaded through them, and everyone on the other end ready to pull, it was finally time to start trying to get John out. Ryan had told John to push with the hand that wasn't pinned beneath him, and then, as the 8 in the large chamber on the other end of the rope started to pull, John started to rise from the fissure once again. But again his feet hit the ceiling. He screamed in pain, and the order was given to lower him once more. The first attempt was unsuccessful. After giving John a rest, another attempt at pulling was made, and slowly, John started to emerge from the fissure. And for the first time in what must have seemed like forever, he was able to meet eyes with Ryan above him. "John, look up at me. How are you doing?" "It sucks. I'm upside down. I can't believe I'm upside down. My legs are killing me." Despite the circumstances though, John seemed in good condition. There was no obvious signs of injuries like bleeding or head trauma, so they lowered him one last time to rest before making the final attempt. Hopes were high that this rescue would go the way of all the others, stuck for a long period of time, but eventually managing to get out. After 20 long minutes, the final call was made to haul. Those on the end of the rope started to pull. And then... the strain on the system had been just too much. The stone arch directly above where John was positioned shattered under the weight of the crew pulling, and John directly below. This caused the carabiner to slam directly into the face of Ryan, who had his tongue almost sliced in half and his jaw broken. Now he had to leave to get help for himself. John, when the arch snapped, simply fell all the way back into where he had always been. Ryan was quickly replaced by his dad, Dave, who, before the arch snapped, was in the other room pulling. The gravity of what had happened was front and center of John's mind. "I'm going to die right here. I'm not going to come out of here, am I?" As worried and as struggling to breathe as John was, he was still thinking of others, asking over and over again whether Ryan was okay. But eventually, he would fall silent, and his breathing slow. Dave drilled desperately at the roof, trying to find another place to put a pulley, but there wouldn't be another attempt. By this point, John wasn't responding to any of the questions Dave would ask him. When Dave was replaced by another member of Utah Cave Rescue, he brought a telecom with him so Emily could speak to John again, this time to tell him, "I know you've been pushing so hard for so long. Why don't you rest for a minute and take a break, and then you can push again." John would never respond. At 11:56 p.m. on November 25th, 2009, a paramedic would crawl into the cave and pronounce John dead. John would remain there. The challenge of removing his body would be much more difficult dead than alive, as he wouldn't be able to help crews move through all the tight twists and turns that led to his position in the cave. The decision would eventually be taken to seal the entrance of Nutty Putty with concrete forever, with John inside it. May he rest in peace. His death serves as a cruel reminder of how a single deadly mistake, once made, cannot be unmade, even if you have the whole world there to help you. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe, or watch this video, where many mistakes were present once again.